Good morning, this is Daybreak. Thanks for staying with us. From New York is Sheila Olang, development economist, joining us from the United States of America. Senior Counsel Okongo Morgan with us in studio. Senator Nyamira County, Professor Peter Kagwanja is the CEO of the Africa Policy Institute, and also with us in studio, Advocate Paul Mwangi, who has been also in the trenches with the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. Key persons, of course, in the coming up with the current constitutional order. Yes, Senator, before I went on a break.
Yes, you didn't pose any question.
Yeah,
I want me to take it from...
Yeah, building on what Prof has said ideally.
Yeah.
On the cornerstone we took in 2013 and how consequential that has proven.
Yeah, I think you can have a very good constitution, but it's also dependent on the individuals who are overseeing, how that constitution is being applied to the citizens. And I think Prof. Kibaki had, I think, a very short period on feeling the impact of the 2010 Constitution. And I would say he showed some respect for the people. And he actually transformed himself from the old Constitution to the new Constitution.
Within that short period? Within
that short period. You remember that it was during Kibaki's year in office, I think that was around 2011, when he tried to reappoint Ringera for a second term without following the law. Okay? And that was tested in Parliament, where you are given a scenario to see who between the executive and Parliament is really the vanguard of the Constitution. And Ringera's name made its way to Parliament, but Parliament said no, you did not follow the law in nominating Justice Ringera. Paul, you'll remember that there was an attempt to appoint Visram as a Chief Justice, okay? And again, Kibaki woke up to the reality that I'm now dealing with a more independent, more assertive Parliament. And I think that name was withdrawn. And I think he also made an attempt to appoint an Attorney General and Kyogo Kilukumi as a Director of Public Prosecution. So I think he transformed his mind very quickly in coming to the reality that I'm no longer dealing with the old Constitution. And I think he stepped back, to allow the new Constitution grow. And I believe, I could be right or wrong, I don't know. I believe if Kibaki had stayed on for a number of years, maybe the mindset of people in the executive respecting this Constitution would have been different. But the rain started beating us, I think, when we first got the Jubilee administration into place. And slowly we started dismantling many articles in our Constitution, including the culture where we borrowed this constitution from America. In America, the president would never determine at any given time who the Speaker of Congress or Speaker of the Senate is. But after Uhuru came in, he started, having a speaker chosen out there. And Parliament just told, this is my speaker. I think that's how Muturi found his way to being a Speaker of the National Assembly. And then
same for
Ekwe Ethro in the Senate. And when he displayed some independent mind, he was told, I'll make sure you don't come back again. And so he was removed, and we had Lusaka come in. Then in terms of institution, you remember the leeway that the head then of Kenya National Human Rights Commission, Maina Kiai, was given. You can just compare Kenya National Commission on Human Rights under the tenure of President Kibaki and the Kenya National Human Rights Commission under President Ruto. You don't feel them, you don't hear them. Look at the independence of the judiciary under Kibaki, where the Judicial Service Commission was given a free hand to pick judges on merit with very little political influence in that process. But I may not have evidence, but now you hear discussions that there there is some influence from the executive that tries to influence who is appointed judge by the Judicial Service Commission. All that is overreach. President Kibaki gave Parliament leeway to pass legislation. I think Paul Mwangi used to sit with the Prime Minister in a committee that used to oversee legislations. And that process really was very much under the control of Parliament. So that's just building the point I'm making, that the person at the top will either allow this document to live its full life, or it can preside over its strangling and death and burial. Yeah. And that's what we are witnessing. Okay. Finally, in terms of devolving bad habits, you remember many times Professor Lumumba warned the nation, because he was the chief executive of Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission, the predecessor of Ethics and Corruption Commission. And he said, be careful that you don't devolve corruption. You have heard the mind-boggling figures the professor is giving us. He's saying we have governors who can bribe an MCA up to 20 million.
20 million, yeah.
Just imagine that this is not somebody from Treasury. Yeah. This is a governor who can withdraw 20 million and give that as a bribe to an MCA. It tells you that in terms of the good governance that was intended, where our biggest weakness is in terms of having institutions that can ensure that we have good governance as a nation.
Yeah, and Paul, the senior counsel paints a picture of adaptability on the part of President Mwai Kibaki. But since the URP-TNA coalition in 2013 to what transpired in 2022, ideally it's a case of an environment that was replete with anathema towards this Katiba. Is it? If you look at, for example, the December 2014 security amendments bill that was passed by Parliament, some sections had to be taken out by the courts. If you look at the amendments done to our financial regulations in 2014-15, if you look at the rulings by the courts during the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020, the BBI, there were clear attempts to dismember, isn't it, this teenager in its attempt to survive an environment that is rather politically very toxic.
First, I believe when we talk about believe in the rule of law, means that we should stop looking too much always on the goodwill of leaders, of those who are in power. Because people in power want more power because it makes their work easier. It doesn't matter who you put there. They'll want to extend the power because it makes the work of governing much easier the more power you have. So even when we were having these appointments, when Kibaki tried to appoint Vistram, first, I don't think the picture of the relationship between Kibaki and the Constitution is that flowery itself. Because one of the people who kept Kibaki in check was Raila Odinga at that time. And if it had not been for Raila, I think Vistram would have been appointed. It is Raila who fought Kibaki back. But even after that was done, when the recruitments were done and the names were taken to the president, another argument came. Does the president merely rubber stamp what has been placed before him? And the Kibaki regime that time fought back and wanted to be given names, kind of like a short list. And then they determine who they appoint. And again, there was another war within the coalition, and again, Raila fought back and made Kibaki have to accept the position that you appoint what you're given. And that became the culture. And I think that's the importance of the culture. But we saw later on, under the presidency of Uhuru, trying to reverse that.
Yes.
And they tried to go back on what Kibaki had done and said, no, you give us more names, you just shortlist people, then me as president determines who will be a judge or not. But he was also fought back, and he had to accept that the president now is a rubber stamp of decisions that are made by the Judicial Service Commission. So going back to where I was saying, we have too much talk about implementation and less talk about defending. And what that is doing is that it is removing our responsibility to the Constitution by not looking at what we must do to make sure this Constitution works, and we keep looking at our leaders and say, no, you must implement. No, there's no leader who will come there with goodwill and surrender power and do nice things. Because every leader wants as much latitude as you can get because it makes governorship easier. But that latitude is only achieved by undermining, unfortunately, some of the processes that are determined by law. So I am saying that we need to start looking more closely at what Article 3 is requiring of us, which is respect, uphold, defend. And the cliche, in fact, it is now more of a political cliche to keep talking about implementation of the Constitution, because Constitution, in terms of the Constitution, it doesn't make any sense anymore to talk about implementation of the Constitution. That was a phase that was provided for by the Constitution itself. That phase ended. Yeah. Let's talk about how to uphold, respect, and defend.
All right. Sheila, coming to you. Paul points out 3 very specific issues: to respect, to uphold, and to defend. So millennials and Gen Z certainly have one advantage on their end, isn't it? And that is education. Kibaki's kids, me, you, and the large majority of Kenya's demography today. How then is it significant that they take up the ownership of the Constitution and defend it from what today is certainly an evidence of growing culture of dislike on the part of the establishment?
I think it's our lifeline if we want to have a nation both today and the future. I couldn't agree more. I think one of the fondest things I will ever remember the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, or Baba, for was that Baba was someone who taught at least our generations how to defend the Constitution. He gave us a sense of ownership of the country. He gave us a sense of, this document provides that your voice must be heard. It provides that you work for us. And I think we have to credit that, especially Raila, for giving us that change of mindset of how we look at leadership. We look at it more as, you're working for us. Who are you representing? If we tell you we don't want something, then you have to listen to it. And I couldn't agree more with saying that we need to defend this, we need to understand it. And unfortunately for the leadership or the political establishment that is there, is you are dealing with Kibaki's children. We are beneficiaries of Kibaki's education. We are beneficiaries of having a constitution where, I remember one time I was discussing with my dad and he was saying, they never had child rights. We had child rights. In high school, all I was doing was advocating for child rights. Both nationally, internationally, I was fighting for child rights and I knew what my rights were, right? And so this was something my parents, for example, admired, that, oh, well, you knew, and I knew exactly which chapter of the Constitution that protected me as my rights. And so I think for our generation, we have to ask ourselves, when people keep asking for these changes, who is asking for them? Is it the citizens who are saying we need a new constitution, or is it the establishment? And if it's the establishment, what are they advocating for? Who are they representing when they're asking for these changes? Because I think it's true, we can no longer rely on political goodwill. But I would also disagree to a certain extent in terms of saying, the leaders we have today they are a product or a reflection of us as citizens. They are a product or a reflection of kind of the limitations of our institutions, of our electoral process. So we have people today, we keep complaining that, parliament is compromised. That parliament actually represents us. We elected people who we are then complaining and saying that parliament is compromised or is taken over by the executive. And I think I'm a realist in terms of political theory. And I'm actually, as we speak even now, I'm in my alma mater. I went to Vassar College, which is in New York. That's where I am now. And I studied political science here. And the Kenyan Constitution mirrors the American Constitution quite closely, and you can see that the intentions were there. But one of the things, the learnings from the American Constitution was that in leadership, in governance, in politics, intentions are not good enough. intentions are not good enough. We have to wake up as a generation and say, you might have the best of intentions by trying to centralize power so you can get us from point A to point B, but we really don't care. We want you to follow the Constitution. We want you we don't want to rely on your goodwill. We want to rely on the fact that you understand your job description and you represent us and you represent our future.
Okay, and Prof, is it then a near perfect biblical style document that we have as our set of governance laws, that in the sense that Katiba today speaks to the past, informed by the past, speaks to present, and does it speak to the future as well, given the generational change occurring in and the cusp of transformation the country is at the moment, and how 2027 next year may prove to be a convergence of generations going forward?
I think the main point to make about this constitution is that it was born out of generations of clamor for freedom. If there's one thing that bound us as Kenyans together, it was the determination to get rid of authoritarianism and the culture it brought across the board, whether we're talking about political leadership, economic management, envisioning development, or we are talking about our culture as a people, meaning the moral underpinnings of the society we want to create. So that's why this constitution has a long life, and nobody, even up to this time, is questioning it. Surprisingly, even the Gen Z in the various uprisings we have seen are actually asserting the Constitution.
In support of it.
They are asserting it. They are asserting the principles that the Constitution held. And that is what has brought up the kind of challenge we are up against. We are up against a system that does not want to uphold the Constitution, to respect the Constitution, or to defend that very Constitution. On the contrary, they want to change the Constitution, they want to sideline the Constitution, and they would also want to appear to be offering something better than the Constitution. This is the birth of this messianism. I am going to do for you, I'm going to bring you development, I am going to uplift you. You are nothing before I appointed you. Like, you are doing it according to the Constitution, because every appointment is prescribed by our Constitution, even at the lowest level, at the county level. Yet, there is this now emerging culture, which is basically a kind of a throwback to the KANU era, where KANU was not just Baba and Mama, it was basically everything about us. And even the chiefs and the youth wingers of KANU would even determine where you have to build your house or where you don't have to build the house. It had reached that level by the early 1990s, where KANU was so stifling in terms of our freedoms and our culture that the struggle for the Constitution was basically not just the articles that we refer to in the Constitution, was the whole spirit of authoritarianism and the new spirit of freedom. So what we have seen within the current dispensation is essentially a system that does not want to uphold the Constitution. Never mind you saw by that Constitution. We've not seen that determination to uphold the Constitution. On the contrary, you want to do hyper marketing, what you can call government by PR, in order to look that you are overdoing, or others doing better than what even the Constitution provides you. What we have also seen are roadside pronouncements rather than deliberate documents that are submitted to Parliament, debated. I don't remember when we had the white paper that we debate, even let it divide us. We've not had the sessional paper number 10 of 1965. We have not had the sessional paper, I don't know whether, of 1986 that Ouko submitted to Parliament. That kind of deliberate adherence to the rule of law, which also means the policy processes must be according to the law. We've not seen that. Yeah. On the contrary, we have this messianic spirit where you want even to set up. I saw one of these moments, and I keep on referring to this, because it really irked me, that you are putting billboards using government money to show what you have done. It was such a abhorrent behavior, and few people noticed it because we are used to billboards. But a government going out of the way to put billboards to show what they have done for us, what is our role? Our role as public is to judge whether you have done it or you've not done it. Kibaki did not put a single billboard. I remember even the campaign for the Constitution. I went and told Mzee, we don't need billboards. If Kenyans agree to wear the green T-shirt, they have accepted the Constitution. And Kenyans from every corner put green T-shirts. So we bought T-shirts, not billboards. Because when somebody wears the T-shirt and every day, and you see the country is turning green, then people have accepted the Constitution. So the point is that I think we need to go back to the drawing board. I know Paul has made a powerful argument that it is the regime that it determines what to do with the Constitution, because the imperative, the task is basically to have more and more power. We are told power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yeah. But a good constitution is the one that ensures that it is not corrupted. And this constitution is good. That's why the younger generation are now the champions of the new constitution, we the people.
Yeah. And Senior Counsel, if we are to provide relevant examples in this case, when, for example, the president's powers are limited by Katiba, Parliament is placed as one of the guardrail institutions to check on the executive. But isn't it appalling and dangerous in a democracy when the House Speaker, for example, campaigns for the government of the day, has no vote in the National Assembly if a matter comes before the House, and MPs who ideally ought to be oversighting the presidency or the executive are also part and parcel of the vocal cheerleaders calling on the head of state or the head of executive to do A, B, C, D. I mean.
Yeah, when this constitution was being ratified in 2010, many of us thought that we were going to have one of the most powerful parliaments anywhere in the world. Because if you look at the text, that's how it's designed. Really, if parliament says no, the president will do nothing. They reserve the power to receive proposed legislation from the president. They can either say yes or say no. You want to propose appointment to your cabinet, you must get the approval of parliament. You want to make any proposal now to spend money, you must get the approval of parliament. Again, your cabinet is at the mercy of parliament. They are the ones who can decide to fire your cabinet. So when you look at the text, one of the most powerful parliaments you can ever imagine. But when you come to practice, is that if there is a section of Kenyans that has never read the Constitution, then it's found in parliament. Because they believe that the best they can do for their people is to go and beg the executive to do what the Constitution has given you power to do, in black and white. It's there. You read Article 221, power resides in Parliament. It's like what you find in Congress. You know, in America, governors will quit their seat and go to serve in Congress because the power, they say, resides in Washington. Because most of the government nominees must get the approval of Senate, even ambassador, legislations, budget. Budget-making process is a big negotiation between Parliament and the executive in the US. And that's what should be happening here. But it doesn't happen. The moment the president decides that this is what I want, our parliament has been reduced to rubber stamp, just agreeing with what the executive has proposed. And that remains one of our weakest links. And, you know, even currently, Parliament is debating the referendum bill. And that takes me to the point Mwangi was telling us about implementation. And, you know, if we get it right on how we craft the referendum bill, we'll actually be giving power back to the people. Because there are countries like Switzerland where you will not enact any law unless you get the approval of the people in a referendum. The same applies with Australia. You know, you make any proposed legislation, including some mundane issues like passing a county legislation, you know, a devolved county legislation, to even cut trees. You need the endorsement of the people, because this constitution is it says we. Everything is we the people. So if we get it right in this referendum, you should not make a monumental legislation without the endorsement of the people. What I'm seeing is in Parliament is reducing a referendum to a matter that should only deal with amending this constitution. But I think referendum should go deeper and return power to we the people, so that when you are coming with any legislation, yes, you go back to the people and you get the buy-in from the people. That way, the supremacy of everything that we do will reside with the people. You know, including when you are passing a law like what we have, which I think remains very controversial, the housing levy. In a proper functioning democracy, that has the kind of text we have in this constitution, public participation should be more meaningful than what we are seeing. It's not about coming to the people and you say, we have this kind of legislation. They present their views. They overwhelmingly give you an opinion that should guide you towards changing that law. Okay. But when you come to Parliament, you say, I did public participation. Yeah. I consulted the people. But you still maintain the text in that law as it was, even before you went to the people. Yeah. I don't think that does not make public participation meaningful. If we get an independent Parliament, if we truly get an independent Parliament, yes, we will totally change the way we govern this country.
Yeah, and Paul, that is the emphasis, is it? Katiba provides for public participation. And the courts have said the issue of quantitative, qualitative, it shouldn't be, as the courts have ruled so many times, that this is meant to be a PR exercise or a cosmetic process just for the formalization processes.
It goes back to the respect. I think Senator Senior Counsel has taken up from what Sheila had said about the fact that a lot of this responsibility will lie in the people we elect. Yeah. And unfortunately, they also end up being a reflection of ourselves. When we were in NASA, we had this, we challenged several bills in court, because what had happened with those bills is that the bill would go to Parliament and it would be passed. Then it would be taken to the president for assent. Mm-hmm. The president would then now refuse to assent and give his proposals on what he wants passed. Mm-hmm. What the law says is that if the president refuses to assent and returns the bill to Parliament, you can force the bill on the president by passing it by two-thirds. By two-thirds. And but once the president has refused to assent and you cannot get two-thirds, the bill dies. But what would happen is that the Parliament started treating the two-thirds as what is necessary to defeat the president. So when the president brings back his memorandum, that memorandum would become law on the false statement then that you need two-thirds to defeat what the president has done. So we've had, as the senator say, a very powerful Parliament. Yeah. But none of those powers are exercised. Mm. If there is anybody who can totally defend this constitution and uphold it, would be Parliament. Parliament has total power over the cabinet. Mm. But members of Parliament will go out on the political platform, complain about ministers, then come back to the house where they can do something about it. and then they just become sheep. Nobody says anything. They become meek. And they don't take the action they require.
Does that amount to self-incapacitation?
Yes, well, we had Senator Alwali when he woke up, that time was an MP, with Kimunya Must Go. And he went.
Yes. and an old dispensation then.
And it was an old dispensation then, but he managed to dislodge him from his seat. We, under the new constitution, I don't think we have seen any
maybe the second formula, you know the second formula where President Uhuru wanted to micromanage the Senate. You remember the arrests, that intimidation. I think maybe that's one time that we saw a parliament that was able to say no to the executive.
And also the example you had given also. There are times when parliament is able to check on the executive. However, we are not putting enough responsibility on those who should be able to stand against. And I am beginning from the point that there is absolutely no member of the executive who is not going to seek more power. Because power makes governance easier. So we must live with the reality that regardless of who will sit in that position, they will always seek more power. The person who we must rely on is our representatives to be able to tell the executive that, no, you're not going to cross this line. It has happened before. They said it had even happened in the old dispensation. The question we must ask now is, where are our representatives?
Yes. I just wanted to add a footnote to what Paul is saying, which is essentially, if you read Mutuli's book, his autobiography.
The file was presented.
Yes. No, it is so telling about how, as a Speaker of the National Assembly, you were considered part of a team that sits. You're not considered as an institution. So the system of the day, or the regime of the day, did not accept the fact that we have a new constitution and a new dispensation. You continue to consider the Speaker as part of a caucus group, which is not even that you're called to State House and to do this. This is in his text. You're called to State House and you are expected to do this. And when you stand up and say, you know, Excellency, I'm not part of this team, I'm a Speaker, then it becomes a very different debate. And I don't know whether the president of that time woke up to that realization that you are treating everybody within government as part of an expansion of the executive, rather than asserting the freedom of the legislature. Because the Speaker is the topmost, person in the legislature, in the governing of the legislature. Second, a file comes. I mean, there's one minister, no names, who is said not to have done in a lot of school. I don't personally privilege schooling, but I also understand we live in a modern society where being literate and actually being beyond literacy is what you need to function well in Parliament. And, he said that this file is missing something, because the CV was 1 page or half a page, and nothing else attached, and said, this is an empty file. And then advice comes from the center, consider it as it is. In other words, you are pushing down Parliament, and it did not change much when President Ruto's regime came to power.
But one question, I think, Prof, now that you ask that, I think that the question would be, where is the Speaker? Because the Speaker was saying what he was being forced to do. So the question is, where is that Speaker that would uphold that Parliament? Because during Trump, we had Nancy.
Pelosi.
Yes, and she was able to stand up against Trump, and very clearly, and it was made very clear, she's the head of an independent institution. And she ran her Parliament as a head of an institution. I think the question then is, where is that Speaker?
It is the way
where is our Nancy?
It's the way our speakers are elected, and when they come to power.
What Senior Counsel pointed out.
Yes, that as a Speaker, you are made to believe that it is tokenism. You didn't deserve it. You are appointed at the mercy of the executive. And the moment you go with debt, the debt of being appointed, that's one. The second is intimidation. You called for a parliamentary caucus, and I'm sure parliamentarians in the hearts of our nation bears this. And there is no consultation, there is no talking. You're being talked down to continuously. and in all the caucuses, until it now comes to your mind that this is the person to respect. You fed with mandazi, ngwashe ndoma, and the tea, and then the only thing you had is being talked down to continuously, and you have to. So there was that deliberate attempt to disrespect Parliament, and this is what we are talking about, the Constitution, upholding it, so what Mwangi has told us, respecting it and defending it. Now, instead of respecting the Constitution, you even disrespect those who are supposed to be implementing.
Okay. So we'll come back to the House leadership and also the architecture, because the Speaker in the event, allow me to emphasize, of let's say the President is impeached, so is his deputy after some time, then the Speaker assumes authority for 90 days before we head for another election to elect a president. So ideally, that's how monumental that office is. So, Sheila, all this, when you listen to the discussion and also modern-day operationalization of our dispensation, it certainly calls for eternal vigilance, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think the core lesson here that we've all learned is, there's a phrase we like to use and say, amkeni tunaibiwa. We always have to be constantly keeping track of what's going on. And anytime we see that there's an attempt at distraction, we're asking ourselves, well, what else could be going on? And it's important to note that everything we're discussing here is also at a devolved level, right? So it's not just at national level; it's also at your local county level to really check, because we have certain functions that are devolved in nature, from healthcare to agriculture and the rest of them. So it's kind of been a double burden in terms of having to keep watch, not just at national level, but also at your local county level. We were having a discussion at a different time and talking about the infrastructure that is currently being invested quite a lot in the Nyanza region. And we had to come to some sort of understanding and saying, despite you having huge infrastructure project, you will find that your local governance could also just still let you down, so that the people themselves don't get to benefit from this. And this was feedback that was actually coming from the people. They were saying, you can build us a very nice hospital, but there is no medicine in the hospital. And that is not the work of the national government at the same time. So it's also important to stay vigilant of the fact that these discussions are not just affecting at national level, but they're also at county level. And Ayub, as an economist, I also look at the Constitution, and I constantly have to think, well, this is a fight of resources. I think Paul was discussing consolidation of power, that anyone who gets into power, the first thing they want to do is they want to see, how do I centralize power, not how do I decentralize power. And as an economist, the first thing I look at when I'm having discussions about Constitution is Chapter 12 of our Kenyan Constitution provides quite a lot of guidance on public finance and checks and balances and accountability and what happens, because at the end of the day, everything boils down for me to resources. We are talking about how are resources governed, how are resources made accountable, and et cetera, et cetera. So it boils down to a question of accountability and resources. And today, I still keep insisting we're going through an economic revolution. At least for my generation, the pain point that we have today is about the economy. It is about resources. It is about the fact that, we need jobs, we need further opportunities, we need more investment. And so it's good to also reflect and see, what does the Constitution say about this? And just to urge my generation that, Chapter 12 provides really good guidance on how resources must be devolved, how resources must be used, and how they must be accountable. So every time you see, for example, the Auditor General give her report and then we throw it kind of under the table casually, every time we're not discussing the issue of debt or ODS debt, we are failing in the Constitution. So we must remain vigilant.
All right. And that vigilance, how can it be made practical by a generation that is yearning for governance changes, pegged the 2024 protest on the implementation of this Constitution, but rarely shows up to exercise that power, that veto at the ballot when it comes to voting, staying away otherwise when the elections beckon?
I think we're going to surprise And by say, I think we're going to surprise a lot of people next year in 2027, because what happened in 2024 is that we were able to take very complex processes, and we learned one simple thing, Ayub. If you synthesize information, if you simplify information, because a lot of this is also relying on ignorance on the part of us, the citizenry. So if you synthesize this information, if you make it easy to understand, then it becomes digestible and people are able to give feedback. I know that traditionally speaking, the younger generation has not been showing up to vote. They have not been showing up to register. But things are moving a little bit differently now. One of the most memorable lines I have from the 2024 era of the finance bill was, remember the guy who said, we the people, we the people. He kept saying, we the people. And just a line as simple as that says a whole lot. He's describing Chapter 4. He's describing the fact that we have a Bill of Rights and the fact that the Constitution is supposed to work for us. So I think for me, I would urge Kenyans, please elect. It starts at the grassroots before we even focus on, the top executive level. Please let us start electing leaders who understand the Constitution and appreciate the Constitution. And I know how the electoral process works locally. And so the idea now is to see, well, how do we make the messaging simple, digestible, understandable, so that the Constitution doesn't become some elite document that, lawyers are supposed to be the only ones who are able to interpret it or understand it. How do we make the Constitution tangible? How do we make it accessible? And how do we make sure that, voters are then empowered with trying to see? And we are learning a lot of lessons as voters, and I don't think things are going to be the same next year, at least at grassroots level, because we have to elect leaders who are listening, who appreciate and understand the Constitution.
Okay, coming to you, senior counsels, certainly this is an important note because I want us to imagine, for example, the Bill of Rights in America, ratified in 1791, that was 235 years ago. And the Second Amendment in specifically, which is the right to own guns. And it points out that in the 21st century, the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Second Amendment reached in part on its placement of specifically here, commerce, the manner in which it was spelled out, to ensure that individual Americans are not malicious and have a right constitutionally to own guns. The founders could scarcely imagine the evolution of guns. Is it modern day machine guns and submachine guns? But they were very specific on this right, which ought not to be taken, meaning it has tightened the noose on possible reaching or overreach or encroachment from an establishment, as Paul points out, which always want to exercise power without limits. In our case, have the drafters of our Constitution equally foreseen circumstances, as we had seen in 2020 with the BBI and the rulings by our courts, of the nature, the obstinate disregard for the rule of law by the political establishment?
Yeah, and maybe first a comment on that Bill of Rights. Remember that was a very controversial issue in 1787. When the people were ratifying the American Constitution sat, they were not able to agree on the Bill of Rights because there are those who feel that the executive is an animal that can reign on citizens. So you need to create a very strong Bill of Rights to protect the citizens from a very powerful executive. And when they realized that they were derailing the process, they said, fine, let us pass this Constitution. We'll come back again. Let us get more time to debate on what kind of Bill of Rights we want. So the first American Constitution did not have the Bill of Rights. It was enacted 1787 without the Bill of Rights. But 5 years down the line, they came back and introduced 12 articles. That was the very first amendment. And they brought in the Bill of Rights that included the right for bear arms, meaning every citizen can guard himself from any enemy, including the executive itself. And you wouldn't get, because of that very powerful Bill of Rights, you wouldn't get a situation like what I saw yesterday, where your MP, John Kagusha, was being charged with an offense called alleged offensive and inciting remarks. That first amendment protected the Americans. That free speech includes what I saw when I was president of Law Society in 2008. I went to America, I went to the White House, and I saw Americans with placards saying, George Bush, you are a murderer, right in front of White House. You know, you can imagine on State House getting Kenyans coming there to picket. And
that was at the height of the Iraq War.
Yeah, at the height of Iraq War, because there are many Americans who believe that George Bush was murdering people in Iraq. So that very powerful Bill of Rights is very, very important. And because you mentioned the Speaker, you know, I always wonder, Mwangi, why the Kenyan Constitution chose to say a Speaker should not be an elected member of Parliament. You know that in the US, Nancy Pelosi has been a long-serving member of House of Representatives from California for a long time. So she didn't really look back and say, if I act very independently, I may lose my seat as Speaker. Because even if you lose your seat, you have a fallback. You remain a member of Congress. So you are really covered, and that gives you leeway to be very independent. Go to the UK. The Speaker in UK retains his or her position as an elected member. And to show how they respect that office and the neutrality of that office, there's been a long-standing tradition where a Speaker never gets an opponent in their constituency. The moment you're elected Speaker in the House of Commons, in the successive elections, if you are a Labour, the Conservatives will not field a candidate against you. They say, this is our Speaker, he serves both houses, he's neutral, so there is no way we are going to escalate our partisanship in opposing him in his electoral seat. So you go back and say, in terms of my electoral seat, it is a safe seat. So you are guaranteed that in the next election you will be back. And they honor those who behave well. When you finish, you become a Lord. And they send you to the House of Lords. The only guy in the recent past who has, failed to get that honor is Beko.
John Baka.
Yeah, John Baka. And you know, Baka there was a perception that when he was a Speaker during Brexit, he exhibited very partisan behavior. And for that, he was punished. He cannot even go back to it in the House of Commons. That's how serious they take this issue of neutrality. And that's how I look at my speakers here, that a Speaker of the Senate or a Speaker of the National Assembly is our Speaker, is the Speaker of the Senate, is the Speaker of National Assembly. He should not look at himself as a Speaker of UDA or a Speaker of ODM, because I should be able to walk to him as a Member of Parliament and say, I have this legislation or I have this statement that is coming to you, how do you process it, Speaker? And he looks at me as a representative of the people. That's the culture that we need to see from the office of our Speaker, and that's how it has been. But as we said earlier, the State House, and I think it's Professor put it, that the executive would like to show or to keep on reminding Speaker that you didn't earn it. You were actually not elected. It's me who gave you the seat.
But Cynthia, if you look at even where it starts, where you become Speaker, it's not even about the election, because the position of Speaker is now part of the
package,
the negotiation.
Actually signed.
Yes,
in the case of the Kenya Kwanza and coalition, we have agreements between all the parties that formed the umbrella Kenya Kwanza coalition, and how they even went ahead to in planning for constitutional commissions that ideally ought to be competitive and based on merit. And how appointments should be done in that regard.
And it's even given to communities. And they say, when we win, this community will have this.
It's a bad culture that we're beginning to develop. And apparently, we are beginning to take pride in it. Because you can see the formulation of the post-Ruto kind of arrangement as it is imagined. By that so-and-so is the best speaker, so-and-so will be this. We are going to, like now within the opposition, I'm hearing, so-and-so will be the president, so can be the deputy running mate, and so will be the cabinet, whatever, senior cabinet, this and that. And then this one can be the speaker.
No, which means for senator, you really never elect a speaker.
No, I mean,
you are given.
in fact, it comes like full package.
Yes.
By the time you are electing the speaker, it's already decreed elsewhere.
In other words,
that the Speaker of the Senate will be so and so. So I think we have always been reminded that we should not be in a hurry to amend our constitution. But I think most progressive societies went back and said we may have omitted something, or there are some challenges on implementing this constitution. Why can't we go back and do an audit on this constitution? And they have done it in a very progressive manner. You know, slavery ended through an amendment to the American Constitution. After reflecting,
it was legal before.
Before that, it was. You know, you remember that up to 1971, they used to say even if you are an adult at 18, you don't have capacity to think how to elect a congressman or a president.
Or women's right to vote until 1920.
1920. You know, in 1971 they said no. I think any person at 18 can cast a vote. You know how they used to pick their senators. You used to go back to the states. If you are a serious businessman, you bribe the state parliament and they pick you. So I think we need, in all sincerity, 15 years down the line, even South Africa did an amendment after 1 year. Australia did it after 6 years. So we need to go back and look at this document that we have. And do some audit and do progressive. We don't want to do amendments that will claw back on the gains, but we look at our governance and improve it a bit so that it can be friendly to Kenyans. Finally, what Sheila was saying, and this goes back to the people. You know, Paul and Professor, that the Constitution has given you a right in Article 119 to petition Parliament direct. When you have an issue, you can come to Parliament direct and petition. And you have a right to sit there, Article 118. Access, you can sit in the committee, you hear how we deal with your matter, you can sit in the full plenary. And our standing order 235 says, if you receive a petition at 10, you amend your order paper and include that petition in the order paper that afternoon. But very few Kenyans have made use of that Article 119. I think if you put us on toes as your parliamentarians, maybe we'll start changing how we
good speakers.
Let's have good speakers
first.
And this culture of power sharing, because it's what leader is beginning to be ingrained in our political behavior. You know, the idea of power sharing and sharing seats that are supposed to be super neutral and impartial in terms of the governance of our constitution, we need to get them out. A speaker must come from any place as long as they make... Remember, this is the only person who is envisioned to cross the two institutions, the executive and the legislature, in case of us sinking to a certain level of political decay. The speaker comes in when the president and the deputy are not there. So it is important to look at that way. I concur with the senior counsel in regard to us to audit the constitution in terms of the future. Now, for example, whether we want it or not, at some stage you'll have to accept the position of a prime minister. Whether you want him with a deputy or no deputy, that's none of my business. But the position of a prime minister will have to enter into our constitution. Why? Because as currently constituted, the imperial presidency is occurring because the president is given everything. And if you look at our organizations, take any corporation, we have the chairman of the board. And we have the managing director. It's a principle of governance where you don't concentrate power within one institution. If the chairman of the company is also the managing director and if it is everything, then you have chaos here. So we need to rethink the executive in terms of how power is shared, while maintaining the principle of ultimate accountability. Who is accountable to the public? That's the president. There's no doubt about that. But the power must be devolved according to the way we do, whether it's Kenya Railways, it is Kenya Airways, even schools, primary schools, we have the headmaster and we have the chairman of the board. you can't have everybody.
All right.
Yeah.
Briefly.
On the issue of when you come to the speakers, I think we should take back this issue as citizens and maybe in civil society. For instance, you cannot have a political bargain in which you agree who is going to be the next Chief Justice.
No.
Kenyans will not agree.
Yeah.
So why do we agree that we can have a political negotiation
On the speaker.
on the speaker? When they say, no, you can't give away the speaker because we will want to elect a speaker that is neutral. So I think it first begins with the people themselves saying we don't want to see any political bargain that gives away this position. But secondly, on the issue of the amendment, I think I've been involved in like 3 citizen attempts at amending the constitution. And yes, it's an uncomfortable conversation, but I think it is a conversation we must have now. That there are amendments that must be done if we are hoping that this constitution will serve us.
Sheila, the last word.
I think mine is to urge the younger generation that we must take guardianship of this constitution. And we must do it now more than any other time. I think we have to start listening much, much more to what is best for our future and not just look at the now. And then just take over, because at some point, if we keep kind of an arm's length and we don't want to be too involved in safeguarding our constitution, then we are going to be paying a lot of debt that, we have no part in looking at it now. And that means that we have to have a complete overhaul of our leadership. Let us, I'm a big advocate for, let us, vote in fresh faces, new faces everywhere, everywhere we go, so that we can try to get people who actually appreciate this far that we have gone, people who are, in all fairness, not too traumatized by whatever happened before and are looking forward to having a future that serves the best interest of Kenya. So, let's get new faces, fresh leadership that is actually championing for the Constitution, that understands the mandate that the Constitution did and appreciates the length at which, our predecessor, like the senior councils we're having today, the lengths they had to go through to bear the fruits that we are looking at today. And let's not take it for granted.
Thank you. So let's sample the feedback. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. So we'll be having that shortly here. The viewpoints from Kenyans who have taken part in the discussion. Babu Michael says the Kenyan Constitution 16 years on clearly reveals that defending the Katiba has only remained for the human rights, etc., and not the obvious institutions like the executive and the judiciary. This is a very unfortunate fact about the Katiba now. Team Kenya says our constitution is not bad. Respecting it is the question. People copied the USA Constitution without looking at the foundation. We want to build a metallic house with a mud foundation. Kenyans respect the book, but elected dealers feel above it. Bob says, Constitution, 16 years on, we have a long way to go for its realization and is still on trial because leaders have not lived to its spirit by not implementing as required by law. Gabi says, devolution remains one of the greatest successes of the 2010 Constitution. Counties have brought services closer to wananchi, but prudent use of public resources and accountability must improve for every Kenyan to enjoy the full benefits. Engineer Lazaro says we need a lot of political goodwill to fully implement the 2010 Constitution, especially Chapter 4, which talks about the Bill of Rights. Chapter 6 should also be reviewed to help tackle rampant corruption in public sectors. Team again says the 2010 Constitution was driven by politicians who were guarding their personal interests. Unfortunately, those who felt their interests were not catered for were elected to implement their enemy. Political conversation is never genuine. Sir Nixon says constitutional rights remain secure only when every citizen feels duty-bound to defend, honor, and refuse to belittle the Constitution. Citizens are the rightful masters to protect the Constitution against those who pervert it. Ras Bashir says 16 years after the promulgation of the 2010 Katiba, I'm disappointed with its implementation. The Constitution contains strong principles and the promises, but too often they have not been fully translated into better governance and improved public services. Babu Michael the Last says, if a regime can't guarantee Chapter 4, Articles 19 to 59, the Bill of Rights, then I can't take it seriously. Till now, the specific and very important article have been the center of the tags of war between the citizens and the regime. So we come to a conclusion. On a point, as Senior Counsel, you pointed out the question of slavery. And one of the most unpopular decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1857, in the decision by Dred Scott versus Stanford, he had sued to obtain freedom from after the death of his owner. And by a 7-2 majority, the court ruled that black people, whether free or slave, are not and cannot be American citizens, that in fact they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. This man is meant that Scott lacked even the standing to sue a dead white man. And that was before now, even Congress had no right to ban slavery, which ended up with now the formation of the Republican Party because the North was against it. And then there was born Abraham Lincoln, the senator. The debate in 1958, he lost to Stephen Douglas, but became the president in 1862 years later. So it's working in progress, imperfections to perfection. Thanks for being with us. Senior Counsel Asante. Prof, thank you so much. Paul, thank you. And Sheila, thank you for joining us from New York. And thanks as well to you for waking up with us here on the broadcast. We'll see you tonight on JKL. Till then, good morning.